Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Sia-Lanu Estrella, who's here to share with us living life as sacred. Are you living your life as a sacred practice? Well, today we're going to cover just that. Sia-Lanu Estrella has transformed countless lives through her profound insights and empowering guidance. Her journey from the corporate world to becoming an author of the best-selling series, The Rainbow Tablets, her work as a sacred embodiment mentor and host of the Live Your Highest Expression podcast is nothing short of inspiring. She worked 70-hour weeks in senior corporate roles for almost a decade until her health went into crisis and her chronic illness became unmanageable. In search for a cure, she traveled to Peru and worked with indigenous practices. Through the journey within, she not only healed herself, but also stepped into a new fulfilling career supporting others to live their highest expression. So welcome to the show, Sia-Lanu Estrella.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so intrigued how you went from a corporate setting to following your heart in spirituality.
Yeah, it was quite a big journey. I think like most of us, I was quite connected as a child. I actually had quite a lot of abilities open, and I really felt that I wanted to do something different in the world. But my parents, bless their hearts, were quite traditional. They were European and had very strong ideas about what my dad would call a real career. Very much following, I guess, what was expected of me. I ended up in the corporate world in top advertising agencies in Australia, and then moving across into marketing roles in financial services. And as much as I was ticking all of the boxes of success, I had the Waterview apartment in one of the most expensive areas in Sydney. By the time I was 25, I was earning six figures. I was in senior roles. I was ticking all the right boxes, but it was kind of like the further I went down that track, the more hollow I felt inside. And to match that, my health really started deteriorating more and more. And it just kind of got to the point where I couldn't deny my truth anymore. And I actually remember the exact turning point. I was at an advertising agency. I was already a senior account director, and we'd just won a big pitch, and they offered me the group account director role. I think I was 20, probably about 27 at the time. And it's as high as you can go before being general manager. It's most people's dream. And I left work that day with such a knot in my stomach and a sense of impending doom. And I actually threw up in the gutter. And I thought, this is not the way that you would normally react to a promotion. And I realized that I just couldn't go down that path of ignoring my truth anymore. So that was the real turning point for me.
So how did you find a path towards healing and towards the path you are now then?
Yeah, I would say it was a journey of unfolding. I don't want to say it was a long journey. I mean, it was, I guess, if you look at terms of years, but I had to undo a lot of conditioning. I think so many of us, we grow up with social conditioning, cultural conditioning. Some people have religious conditioning, familial conditioning. So there's a lot to unravel. And I also had a lot to heal. And so the first thing I did was I resigned from my role and I moved across to marketing at an amazing children's charity, so that I at least felt like I was using my skills to make a difference in the world. And I mean, I took a $30,000 pay cut at that time, which back then that was a lot of money. But the joy that it brought me to be doing something with my skills that I felt passionate about was one step to healing. And then the rest of it was really starting to follow what I would call the whispers of the heart, or following the breadcrumbs. I started to go deeper into meditation. I started training in different modalities. I'm trained in sound healing, in yoga, in shamanic practitioner work, just kind of exploring and following those impulses of the heart. But the biggest one had always been for me this draw to Peru. I had always felt very drawn to Peru from the time that I was about 13 years old. I said I was going to live on a mountaintop in Peru. And as an adult, I started going about every year and a half. I would go for anything from 2 to 4 months, taking time off work to go. And I would always come back saying I was going to move there. But you come back to what people refer to as real life, and it just seems unrealistic. And then there was pressure from my family to stay. And it kind of got to the point where I realized I really had to answer my calling. And it might sound strange, but there's a very, very sacred mountain in Cusco. It's the most sacred. They call the mountain spirits apus. It's the most sacred apu in the Cusco region. And this mountain is called Alsangate. And Alsangate had been calling me to start running retreats. And I was just like, why are you talking to me about that? I don't do that. And sort of these feelings of unworthiness were coming up. And the mountain was very persistent. And so after about 4 months, I said, okay, I will do it, but you have to help me with everything. I'm putting my full trust in the universe and my full trust in saying yes to this. And it was so incredible. I only ran it, my first retreat was only 6 people. I kept it quite small. That was the amount that I had set, and I got the 6 people, but I wanted to keep it small because it was my first retreat that I was running, and it was so incredible and powerful. And we ended up at our Sangate on my birthday. And I said to the mountain, okay, what wisdom do you have for me? And the mountain said to me, you need to move to Peru. And I was like, well, I mean, that time's gone. I've just bought a new car and I have a dog and I've now got a fantastic job and all of these kind of things that we think are in the way. And the mountain just kept saying for days, you need to move to Peru. And so on the fourth day, I just said yes. I said yes, having no idea what I was stepping into. And I went back to Australia. I gave 3 months notice at my job because I was in quite a senior role and wanted to give them time to find a suitable replacement. I sold my apartment, sold my car, found the most perfect, amazing family for my dog. And I moved to Peru with nothing but 2 bags and just this willingness to follow the innate wisdom of my soul.
Now, how impressive is that? And you have such a remarkable story, and I'm so impressed with it. I know you talk to people about what it means to live life as sacred, and I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah, this was a big thing. I feel it was really life-changing for me because I think so many of us who grow up in modern society, we grow up with a lot of disconnection without even knowing that we're disconnected. We don't think of the land as consciousness. We don't think of the mountains as consciousness or the elements. We sort of even don't necessarily have that much connection with ourselves. Even if we meditate a little bit, it's that depth of connection, because so much of what has been drilled into us growing up has been about external validation. It's been about getting the high grades, getting into the right university, getting the promotions, buying the first house, buying the second house. It's all about these external milestones. And I think so many of us, we feel that something is not aligned. We feel that there's something more than kind of the hamster wheel, but we don't know how to connect with it. And I guess the big breakthrough for me was learning connection through ceremony and through the sacred. And I actually remember, gosh, when I was about 25, one of my mentors at the time had mentioned about ceremony, and I think I was quite arrogant at that time. I thought, well, I don't need ceremony. My abilities are quite open. You know, I had a very strong intuition, even though I probably wasn't following it that time. But I was very headstrong. I was very headstrong. I was very stubborn, and I didn't see the point in ceremony. And I think that's just because I was in such disconnection and fragmentation. You know, we're taught to multitask all the time, so our energy is always fragmented. And moving to Peru, it really taught me how to come back into that connection within myself, come back into that what I call sacred co-creation, which is where we start to realize that we are working together with the lands and together with the stars and our guides and our team, and that we actually create our reality. So ceremony isn't, it isn't just about the sake of ritual. It's ceremony is more about the pathway to the heart, the pathway back to connection, the pathway into the deeper weaving with these other energies. So I, as I'm sure you know, I'm an author, and my first book was the Rainbow Tablets Journey Back to Wholeness. But in June, I'll be releasing my third book, which is the Rainbow Tablets Abundance and Sacred Co-Creation. And it's something I'm so passionate about because I've seen for myself how much we create our reality through the way that we connect with the lands around us. And I'd actually love to share a story, if that's okay, around how I created a miracle to see my dad.
Oh, yes, I'd love to hear that.
So this is probably for me the most profound expression of what is possible. When I was about to release my first Rainbow Tablets book, I was called, because I do work so deeply with the lands, I was called to go to Uluru in Australia. It's the most sacred site in Australia, and to ask the ancestors for permission to release this cosmic remembering. These are channeled books restoring cosmic wisdom to really awaken our power and our remembering within ourselves, this sovereignty and divinity. So I went out there and I received the blessings. I had also, as part of this, I had been to Egypt and Peru and sat in ceremony there to receive the blessings. And on my last day in Uluru, I was just sort of channeling some messages from the ancestors there. And I closed my journal and I said, thank you. And I got up to leave, and one of the grandmothers stepped forward and she said, there's one more thing you should know before you leave. And I said, what is that? And she said, this time home will be the last time you see one of your parents.
Wow. Well, on that note, we are going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Sia-Lanu Estrella in regards to living life as sacred. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you a coffee lover who wants to make a difference? Look no further than Fire Department Coffee, a veteran-owned business that gives back to support first responders in need. Each batch of coffee is freshly roasted right here in the USA by a dedicated team of first responders and coffee experts. So when you enjoy a cup of Fire Department coffee, you're not only drinking high-quality coffee, you're supporting members of your community. Start your day with a coffee that gives back. Visit firedepartmentcoffee.com. That's fire, DEPT, coffee.com.
Hey, pay attention, everybody. Amy Vaughn and myself, Dutch Mendenhall, are hosting an event. Have you ever felt like the wealthiest in America play by a different rule book? Even if you earn well, make money, invest wisely, educate yourself, there is an invisible barrier. It separates you from the financial security enjoyed by America's elite. The economic landscape changes every day. The wealthy elite know how to stay ahead of it because we play by a different rule book. At Invest Well Summit, we'll share all the plays, and we're making it to win. Spots are going to sell out fast at Invest Well Summit, so get your butt to investwellsummit.com and secure your seat now.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Sia-Lanu Estrella, who's here to share with us Living Life as Sacred. Before we left for break, we were talking about how you're visiting one of the most sacred sites in Australia when you received some very heart-wrenching news from one of the elders. Can you share that with us again?
So I went out there and I received the blessings. I had also, as part of this, I had been to Egypt and Peru and sat in ceremony there to receive the blessings. And on my last day in Uluru, I was just sort of channeling some messages from the ancestors there. And I closed my journal and I said, thank you. And I got up to leave, and one of the grandmothers stepped forward and she said, there's one more thing you should know before you leave. And I said, what is that? And she said, this time home will be the last time you see one of your parents. And that, getting news like that, my parents were healthy at that time. And I just said, thank you, but I choose a different timeline. I choose a different reality. And I flew back to Sydney. This was around, I think it was January 2020. So it was just before the pandemic. And I flew back to Sydney. I had 4 days of plans, catching up with everyone, and I canceled everything. And it makes me teary to talk about it. But I just played cards with my parents and had lunch with them and sat around and drank cups of tea and just spent that time. And then the pandemic happened, and I was living in Peru. We went into quite a strong military lockdown. And about 4 months in, I had a need to have a medical procedure that I couldn't get there, but the borders were closed. There was no way out. And I had to manifest a miracle, which I was able to do, and ended up in the UK. But then once I got to the UK, I was stuck because Australia had its borders closed and I couldn't go anywhere else. Thankfully, my mum was a British citizen, was born in England. So I was able to get my citizenship. And then December 2020, my dad went in for a routine colonoscopy and they perforated his bowel and they didn't realize, and they sent him home. And so later that night, he was in excruciating pain. He was rushed to the hospital and it started a series of over 20 operations. And it became clear pretty quickly that I needed to get home. And it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. I don't know if you remember, but Australia closed their borders. There were about, I think at the time, they estimated 44,000 people trying to get back. And I booked a commercial flight, it got cancelled. I booked a second flight, it got cancelled. I booked a third flight and it got cancelled. And this was over the period of about 6 weeks. And by this time, it was really not looking good for my dad. And when I had to tell him that my third flight had been cancelled, it just looked like his soul had been crushed. And I said to him, Dad, don't give up on me. You know the magic I work with. You know that I don't play by the limitations or the rules. I'm coming. Please hold on. So that night, I thought, what more can I do? And I had people saying to me, Sia, you have to just accept this is the reality of the world. There's a lot of people not getting to say goodbye to their parents. But my answer was, but that's not my reality. I know I create my reality. And so I thought, what can I do? And I was like, well, the answer is always sacred co-creation. And I realized the answer laid with the ancestors at Uluru because they were the ones that told me this was going to happen. So from my London apartment, I came into ceremony and I connected in multidimensionally with the ancestors at Uluru. And I remember kneeling before them. Like I said, it makes me choke up to talk about this. I was kneeling before them and I said, please, I know you told me this would happen, but I told you I chose another timeline. And I'm asking if there's any way you can help me to get home to see my dad. I need you to open the pathway. And I said, if there's anything that you need me to do, I'm so happy to be in service as long as it's for my highest good and the highest good of all. And they said, well, actually, there's some higher frequency codes that we need you to anchor on Earth. And I said, absolutely, I'll do it. And it was about a 10-hour process. It was a very intense transmission that I anchored into the Earth. And then I went to bed exhausted that night. And the next morning, I woke up to an email from the Australian government saying I had a flight home. And I had been on that list for 7.5 months. 7.5 months, not a single communication. And then after I came into that sacred co-creation of working with the ancestors, working with the lands, working with my star family to open up the pathway, there it was. And at this time, my dad was actually in a coma. And I said to my mum, hold the phone up to his ear. And I said, Dad, I'm coming home. It's a government flight. It won't be cancelled. They don't cancel government flights. I'm coming home. I need you to hold on. And we saw his eyelids flitter, and then a tear went down his cheek. I made it home. And by the time I got home, he was actually out of the coma. Well, I had to spend 14 days in the quarantine center. And again, we weren't sure if he was going to be able to hold on. But by the time I got out of quarantine, and again, the whole time I was working with the lands and the ancestors, he was awake, he was sitting up, and I got 3 beautiful weeks of being able to play cards with him and laugh with him. And I got to have that final hug. I had to rush back at very short notice because my flight back got cancelled and they started closing all the borders again. So I had to fly out through Singapore because it was the only place left open. And I will never, ever, ever forget that last hug from my dad.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Just a beautiful story and example about how we really are co-creating and choosing our own paths forward.
Yeah, and I think this is the big thing is we get so, I guess we're so used to the way that things are, and I guess what I would call the 3D illusion. And this is what living life as sacred has done for me. It has brought me back to the truth of who we are, the truth of what's possible. And this is when you realize that there are no limits. All of these limits that we perceive, it's because of the framework that we've been conditioned into. And as we start to open up to more of the truth of who we are, we start to shed that conditioning, we start to heal our trauma, we start to awaken our beautiful cosmic nature, all of a sudden life becomes incredibly magical, and we realize that magic and miracles is the true reality. And yes, it takes embodiment. It's not something that just happens automatically. It's something that we choose and we cultivate for ourselves, and it's an active embodiment process. But it's completely different to what we've been, I guess, led to believe that life is.
Well, I know that we're going to get together and talk again when your new book comes out. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first 2 books, The Rainbow Tablets Journey Back to Wholeness and The Rainbow Tablets Divine Union and Sacred Sexuality, they're both available through my website, which is Sia-Lanu And I also have a podcast called Live Your Highest Expression. So I would just say, even just the simple thing of reading the books, it awakens a deep remembering within us. And it's such a gift to ourselves when we give ourselves that permission. And I guess if I were to reflect on my journey, there would be kind of, 5 biggest lessons. So I think the first one is that we're always being guided towards our heart's and soul's greatest desire. I think we get a lot of messages. I knew those stirrings of my heart. I knew where I was being guided to, but I think sometimes our conditioning, our ego, our minds get in the way, but our hearts and our soul will always be there, trying to guide us to the truth of what we came here to do. And so just starting to listen to the whispers of the heart. Number 2 would be saying yes will transform your life. That was the biggest thing for me when I started saying yes. And it's not a blanket yes, it's a yes with discernment, but it's a yes to what your heart and soul is telling you as opposed to what your mind and everybody else is telling you. And when we start saying yes, even if it's a little bit scary, like me turning down that big promotion and starting to move towards the life that I wanted to create for myself, it not only transforms our lives in that moment, but it brings in more of that energy. It brings in greater possibilities. Number 3 is it's not about the destination, but the now. I think a lot of people want to know what they're moving towards and what the answer or the outcome is before they start taking steps. And the biggest thing I've learned is it doesn't actually work that way. It's an unfolding. We live into our highest expression. So it's by taking those baby steps, by following the breadcrumbs, that the next step becomes revealed, it becomes apparent, and we end up in a place that is far more incredible than we even could have imagined, because at that starting point, we're viewing things from within a box of our own frame of reference. But as we grow and as it unfolds, that box gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the possibilities become more and more. Number 4, I would say your embodiment is the key to everything. It's our absolute superpower. We are the change in the world. We are the ones that bring what we want to see in the world. And as I said, embodiment is an active process. So while I also talk about living life as sacred, I also share a lot about coming into our multidimensional mastery and sacred embodiment, because that's the biggest power that we have. And the 5th thing is that the work doesn't have to be hard. I think there's a perception that if we start the journey, because yes, there will be things to heal and there'll be elements of the ego death and everything, that it's going to be hard and grueling and all of this. And yeah, there are moments like that. Of course there are. There is with anything. But actually, if we approach the journey with childlike curiosity and see it as an exploration, then it really becomes quite joyful and magical. There's a line in my first book where it says the journey back to wholeness is a process of shedding all that we are not in order to re-embody all that we truly are. And that moment of remembering yourself is pure bliss. And that for me has definitely been the journey, that moment when we really start to remember ourselves and unlock the truth of who we are. It's beyond any sense of joy and magic and just incredible wonder than we could have ever imagined.
Well, Sia-Lanu, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting to you again when the 3rd book comes out.
Well, I look forward to that as well. If you'd like to connect with Sia-Lanu Estrella, you can at her website, Sia-Lanuestrella.com, to learn about her books and how you can book an appointment with her. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.